Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we've been handed a singular source unlike many we encounter.
Mhm.
It's an incredibly rich, dense, and deeply spiritual historical narrative.
It really is.
Its goal seems to be providing a comprehensive view of Palestine, but framed entirely through, well, centuries of faith and lineage.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it doesn't present itself as just a historical summary.
Hmm.
I think our mission today is to unpack the specific uh, architecture of this narrative.
The architecture.
Yeah, how it intentionally ties historical events to a continuous theological legacy. We need to look at why this specific framing is presented as a digital memorial of truth.
So this is fundamentally about understanding the source's own interpretation of its history of faith and resilience.
That's it. It's a story that insists its starting point is devotion, not conflict.
That distinction feels immediate and really crucial. It doesn't start with geopolitics, it starts with sanctity. It identifies Palestine as a land blessed by God, protected by angels, and honored across generations. So let's unpack that. We're essentially tracing a lineage from ancient prophets all the way to the modern age.
And what's fascinating is the source's first priority. It's all about establishing the land's sacred roots through an unbroken line of monotheism. It sort of claims spiritual ownership through connection, not conquest.
So let's set that ancient stage then. The narrative centers on the prophet Abraham's journey. It emphasizes his journey through these valleys, with Sarah and Hagar as this foundational moment.
Right. And by starting with Abraham, the source immediately establishes a shared root with the other Abrahamic faiths.
Mhm.
But then it quickly, traces the specific spiritual continuation through his descendants.
Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses.
Exactly. And the claim here is profound. It says their footsteps literally shape the moral history of humanity, and their prayers are what rooted the people in this specific land under this banner of monotheism.
That's a huge claim. The moral history of humanity begins here.
It's a massive claim.
And this moral foundation then seems to culminate in Jerusalem, or what the source calls Al-Quds.
The holy, yeah.
So the narrative then shifts specifically to the era of prophets David and Solomon. What details does the source give us about their governance?
So this section is really positioned as the golden age of righteous rule. David, according to the source, established his rule with justice, divine law, setting this really high standard for leadership.
Okay.
And then comes Prophet Solomon, who governs not just with human wisdom, but with divine permission.
Commanding the winds, the jinn, and even the birds.
Yes.
Say, commanding the winds and jinn, that sounds, legendary. Why include those specific details in what's meant to be a serious historical narrative?
It's a powerful rhetorical choice. It really is. The source is explicitly recalling this era as one defined by divine fairness, absolute control guided by God, not by human ambition or, tyrannical force.
So it's setting an impossibly high, almost supernatural benchmark for what pure, righteous governance in the land should look like.
Exactly. It's the moral standard against which all subsequent rulers, and of course the present reality, are going to be measured.
And this is where the narrative makes its pivotal connection, weaving Jerusalem into the global Muslim community, the Ummah.
Mm-hmm.
For listeners who might not be familiar, the Ummah is the worldwide collective of Muslims, and the source emphasizes the miraculous night journey and ascension of Prophet Muhammad.
Yes, the Isra and Miraj. This event is the theological anchor. Prophet Muhammad was miraculously carried to Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, the farthest mosque in Jerusalem.
And there he led all the previous prophets in prayer.
Right. And that act, according to the source, forever solidified Jerusalem as the third holiest site in Islam.
That image is so powerful. Prophet Muhammad leading Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and others in prayer. What does that do for the narrative structure?
Well, it establishes Jerusalem as this continuous sanctuary. It links the earliest prophets to the final one in one single chain of spiritual leadership.
So it's saying the sanctity of Al-Aqsa isn't just historical.
It's perpetually reaffirmed through the final revelation. It's an essential, non-negotiable part of the collective Muslim identity.
That spiritual weight then leads directly into what the source calls the golden principle of governance.
Yes.
It spends a lot of time detailing the entry of the second caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, into Jerusalem centuries later, and it describes this moment as an era of, well, exceptional peace.
And this is strategically presented as the historical fulfillment of that divine fairness template we saw with David and Solomon.
So it's the real-world example.
It's held up as the primary tangible example of what the source calls true Islamic governance.
And what made it so exemplary? What were the specifics of that famous covenant?
The specifics are crucial for the source's argument about coexistence. The city lived under a covenant of protection. And critically, the source emphasizes that not a single home was confiscated.
Okay.
No church was desecrated. This is presented as the historical blueprint for religious coexistence and minority rights under Islamic rule.
So how did that coexistence actually look on the ground?
Well, the source states it very clearly. It was a peaceful equilibrium. Jews were permitted to return to their neighborhoods, Christians preserved their holy places, and Muslims built their mosques.
And this scenario leads directly to the golden principle.
It does. It says, wherever true Islamic governance prevailed, there was dignity, coexistence, and justice. And conversely, wherever tyranny seized control, the land suffered.
It creates a deliberate kind of binary moral contrast.
Absolutely. And that contrast frames everything that happens next in the modern era.
That binary is a perfect segue. The narrative takes a very sharp turn from this golden principle to what it titles the deepest wounds.
It's a highly effective rhetorical move.
The source signals a transition from historical faith to the modern era of oppression.
And it connects modern suffering directly to the violation of that original covenant. The narrative points straight to 1917, when foreign powers redrew the land without the consent of its people.
That's the geopolitical starting point.
That's what it identifies as the beginning of the modern crisis.
And then the central historical catastrophe, the Nakba in 1948. The source describes this catastrophe when hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were expelled from their homes.
Yes.
The emotional weight here is intense and it's very specific.
It absolutely is. This is where the ancient and the modern threads just powerfully intersect. The source highlights what the displaced carried with them.
Not just clothing.
No, Korans, legal deeds of ownership, and so significantly, the keys to houses standing since the days of ancient prophets.
Why focus so heavily on the keys? What's the rhetorical purpose there?
The K is such a powerful symbol. It's about continuous stewardship and deferred return.
Right.
By mentioning the keys and the deeds alongside that ancient lineage, the connection to the prophets, the source is suggesting the loss in 1948 wasn't just physical or political.
It was a spiritual violation.
A spiritual violation of that original Abrahamic covenant of stewardship. It turns a historical event into an ancestral trauma, tying modern suffering all the way back to the start of the narrative.
And the narrative is very clear that the suffering didn't stop in 1948. It details these ongoing injuries over more than 7 decades.
Indeed, it catalogs a continuous assault. Land confiscated, homes demolished, the destruction of olive trees, which are huge symbols of rootedness. And it mentions children being imprisoned and the repeated attacks on worshippers in the courtyards of Al-Aqsa.
So it forces the listener to view the current conflict not as, a series of isolated incidents,
But as a continuous, deliberate violation of the sacred land and its people.
This continuous trauma then leads the source to narrow its focus to the most intense modern trial, Gaza.
Yes.
The source describes Gaza as a small strip of blessed land, surrounded, besieged, inhabited by a people whose faith is stronger than hardship.
And the description of the destruction is, it's detailed and harrowing.
Yes.
The source lists the systematic destruction. Hospitals bombed, schools flattened, generations lost.
Chillingly, it says hunger and thirst are weaponized.
It does. And the specific mention of families being erased completely is intended to convey the scale of erasure that the source is memorializing.
And this extreme environment is what sets up the theological framing. This is where it makes its most profound spiritual connection. Suggesting the suffering there echoes the severe trials of the prophets themselves.
This is a classic narrative strategy, but it's used here with immense weight. It elevates the collective struggle to a cosmic prophetic scale. It sort of validates the immense loss through sacred history.
What are the specific examples it uses?
It cites some of the most iconic trials. Joseph thrown into the well, the children of Israel oppressed under Pharaoh, Mary enduring hardship all alone, Job tested with unimaginable loss, and Abraham cast into the fire.
And the narrative's staggering conclusion is that here, an entire nation is bearing all of these trials at once.
Collectively at the same time. It presents the whole struggle as a continuous manifestation of the ultimate test of faith.
The rhetorical power of that is, well, it's immense.
It is. If an entire nation is enduring the trials of the prophets, then their suffering takes on a spiritual meaning that supersedes any political outcome.
And yet, despite that overwhelming burden, the source pivots sharply to resilience.
Yes, claiming that Palestine shines with a spiritual steadfastness the world cannot comprehend.
And this